hockey fans. Yes, indeed, I have returned to the channel. Hockey season again is underway, and I figure a player bio is in order. With the recent passing of my uncle, who was a huge Calgary Flames fan, I figure I'd cover the great career of Joe Nieuwendyk in a 4-part series. He was someone that was slightly overlooked early on, despite being a natural athlete and at 6'2", had some size on him. He's also a tremendous stick handler with strong puck control abilities, as well even being checked, he would very rarely lose possession. His wrist shot abilities would often make for great snappers on goal when he get close in proximity to any given goaltender. He is also tremendous in the faceoff circle, good on the check. And now, we go further in depth on this man. Joseph Nieuwendyk was born September 10, 1966 in Oshawa, Ontario, but grew up in the town of Whitby. As the youngest of 4 children to Gordon and Joanne Nieuwendyk, who immigrated from the Netherlands in 1958. Sports was all the rage in his family. His brother Gil had excelled in box lacrosse, while a cousin of his, Ed Key, a gritty defenseman, would play 583 NHL games as a member of the Atlanta Flames and St. Louis Blues from 1974 to 83. Also another cousin of his, just a year older than him, tough guy and fan favorite Jeff Bukaboom, played just over 800 NHL games from 1986 to 1999, collecting a few Stanley Cup rings along the way, 3 with the Oilers and 1 with the Rangers. And growing up, he was best friends with the man he'd built his career alongside, Gary Roberts. Nieuwendyk excelled at both hockey and lacrosse, but was actually much more interested in the latter sport. He became a star at the age of 15 for the Whitby Warriors, but also stayed in hockey. However, in 1984 and 85, he led the Warriors to the Minto Cup Championship back-to-back as the best junior lacrosse team in Canada. He was named MVP of the tournament in 1984. However, his hockey career, which Joe admitted was secondary, saw him grow in his game, but he was still just as committed in terms of his determination. He was overlooked, however, by the OHL and played for the Junior B Pickering Panthers and excelled with 30 goals and 28 assists for 58 points in 38 games in their 1983-84 season. He then chose to make his way to Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, a hockey program that was regarded as one of the best of the NCAA Division I program, and the Eastern College Athletic Conference, as he would play both lacrosse and hockey for the Big Red. Cornell actually once produced future NHL legend Hall of Fame goaltender Ken Dryden years before. In the 1984-85 season, Nieuwendyk was named ECAC Rookie of the Year with 21 goals and 24 assists for 45 points in just 29 games. And now at 18 years old, was eligible for the NHL draft. But there was a problem. Not many teams were looking at Joe. Despite what he had to offer, there were still many GMs and scouts still overlooking the American University program. However, Calgary Flames head coach at the time, Badger Bob Johnson, an icon in American collegiate hockey, he indeed produced arguably the greatest American hockey program of all time for the University of Wisconsin Badgers. So he was well aware of what was out there. As a matter of fact, it also helped that general manager Cliff Fletcher was one of the few GMs who had a scouting team that were aware of what was going on in the NCAA. As a matter of fact, Kerry Wilson, Eddie Beers, Jamie McCowan, Steve Bozek were all part of the NCAA Division I hockey in their junior years. And a Badger alum, American-born Gary Suter, was in the Flames development system, while another U.S. citizen, Joel Otto, got noticed playing Division III hockey. The 1985 NHL draft took place on June 15, 1985 in Toronto, 1 year removed from one of the biggest classes ever, led by Mario Lemieux. On paper, many thought this would be pretty damn good too. On that day, the Flames made a monster shakeup of a trade. The Flames sent All-Star center Kent Nilsson, along with third-round pick either in 1986 or 87, to the Minnesota North Stars in exchange for second-round draft picks this year and in 1987. On paper, this looked very one-sided. Nilsson had been a major part of the Flames since their final season in Atlanta in 1979-80, and had statistically been their best forward with 562 points in 425 games and 2 100-point seasons, just coming off a 99-point season this past year. A great playmaker and sensational to watch, some felt he didn't show up some nights, and his decent yet not great 28 points in 33 playoff games was something that wasn't ignored. A top player should be producing at a higher level come playoff time, and some felt his lack of defense was a hindrance as well. And things were tense between he and the organization, so they were in a hurry to get rid of him. So the Flames in the first round took defenseman Chris Biotti, who never played a single NHL game. The Flames' defense was already strong with all-stars McInnes and Paul Reinhart, as well as the durable Jamie McCowan. Gary Suter was about to enter his rookie season. The only good defenseman available at that point was Eric Weinrich, who would play over 1,150 NHL games, and Steve Chiasson, who went on to have a pretty good career and would actually end up in Calgary later on. But when all said and done, who did the Flames take in the second round with the 27th overall pick? Well, from Cornell University, center Joe Nieuwendyk. Joe was ecstatic, but the hockey media all through Canada, not just in Calgary, was vicious. A headline in a Calgary paper stated, "Joe who?" But you can see their point. Kent Nilsson, again, was one of the best players in the game, in the history of the franchise as well. The draft class would end up being one of the most disappointing in history, only to be topped by 1986 a year later, which many felt was going to be every bit as good as 84. But I digress. The 1985 draft was the only one of the 1980s that didn't have a Hall of Famer taken in the first round. Some notable picks, however, were Wendell Clark of the Toronto Maple Leafs, who was taken first overall, and was one of their most popular players in their history. He even has his number honored, despite many injury issues. Craig Simpson was taken by the Pittsburgh Penguins second overall, but was later part of the famous Paul Coffey trade and went to the Oilers and scored 56 goals and went on to win 2 Stanley Cups, and has since had a great career as a TV analyst as he was forced to retire early. Swedish import Ulf Dahlin was taken by New York 7th overall and played 966 NHL games, a reliable forward reaching 20-plus goals 7 times. Defenseman Dave Manson was taken 11th overall by Chicago and built a reputation as an NHL tough guy, playing just over 1,100 NHL games, was a fan favorite in Chicago and Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Montreal, playing for 7 teams total, amassing 2,800 penalty minutes. Derek King was a hard-working forward born in my hometown of Hamilton, Ontario. Was taken by the Isles, spent most of his 830 games playing for them, and was a fan favorite on the island. He had stints in Hartford, Toronto, and St. Louis, and reached a 20-goal mark 6 times. And there's also Calle Johansson. He was taken right after at number 14, played 1,110 NHL games, and he was taken by Buffalo, as Scotty Bowman's intuition of European players was ever present. But his time in Buffalo came after Bowman left and was short-lived, and was sent to Washington, where he'd play 15 seasons. More notable picks other than Joe who came later in the later rounds. Taken 3 spots before him was goaltender Sean Burke to the New Jersey Devils. Burke had a successful career, helping the Devils become a playoff team. Spent most of his time playing for lackluster clubs, but still won 324 games. Is regarded as the greatest goaltender in Canadian international play of all time. Was named to the all-time IIHF All-Canadian team. Taken right after Joe was American goaltender Mike Richter by the New York Rangers, who won just over 300 games and part of that infamous 94 Stanley Cup winning team. Taken 32nd overall was defenseman Eric Weinrich, who would be a reliable journeyman, was taken by the Devils, had stints in Hartford, Montreal, Boston, Philadelphia, St. Louis, and Vancouver. His longest stay in one place was 6 seasons in Chicago, where he is best known. Taken 50th overall in the 3rd round was Steve Chiasson by the Detroit Red Wings. He had become key in the Wings in their building up throughout the early 90s, and played in the NHL All-Star Game in 1993. And like I said later, he would end up in Calgary, and then in Hartford, where he stayed with them until they moved to Carolina. Played a key leadership role, but tragically died young in a car accident at the age of 32. Taken 2 picks later was goaltender Bill Ranford, 52nd overall by Boston. He fizzled out in Boston pretty quick, but he came up huge for the Oilers after their star goalie Grant Fuhrer was suspended. Ranford won the starting spot and led the Oilers to the 1990 Stanley Cup and won the Conn Smythe Trophy as playoff MVP and played 14 seasons. And all the way down to round 11, 212 overall, Soviet megastar Igor Larionov was taken by the Vancouver Canucks, which, yes, sounds ridiculous, but the Iron Curtain hadn't fallen as communism still reigned in many parts of Europe, but the end was near, and many NHL teams were taking these guys to either fill picks or hoping indeed they would defect to North America at some time or another. While Larionov would debut in the NHL, he already had 8 Soviet League titles, 2 Olympic gold medals, 5 World Championships, and a Canada Cup. After 3 years with the Canucks, and a little bit with the Sharks, he'd spent 8 seasons in Detroit as part of Scotty Bowman's infamous Russian 5 unit, and took home 3 Stanley Cup rings. He's just one of 2 Hall of Famers from this entire class. Who is the other? Nieuwendyk continued to excel in 1985-86 playing for the Big Red. Not only did he average 2 points a game with 42 points in 21 games, he was named to the ECAC First All-Star Team and was a first-team All-American named by the American Hockey Coaches Association and represented Team Canada at the 1986 World Junior Championships and took home a silver medal. He had 5 goals and 7 assists for 12 points in 7 games as one of the standout performers in the tournament. Made Calgary fans take notice. Also that year, the Calgary Flames, a team who had his rights, made a miracle run to the Stanley Cup Finals, highlighting with an upset over Wayne Gretzky and the powerful Edmonton Oilers in 7 games. Things only got better for Joe, however. His 3rd year at Cornell in 86-87 saw him produce even better. 52 points in 23 games, with 26 each in goals and assists. He again was a first-team All-Star and All-American, and was also named ECAC Player of the Year. Joe also spent some time with Canada's national team playing 5 games, scoring 2 goals in 5 games, but then he got the call. The Calgary Flames' origins began in Atlanta. Their inaugural season was 1972-73, and the man steering the ship was the same man still steering it after 15 years come 1987, Cliff Fletcher. Fletcher had a reliable scouting team and knew the right deals to make, so much so the Flames were excelling quicker than many expansion teams, even their 1972 counterparts, the New York Islanders. However, by the Flames' 4th season, they were a playoff team, but despite the talent, they couldn't find playoff success. The Islanders were now miles ahead of them by this point, especially by 1978. However, by the Flames' sixth season in 1978-79, they reached a 90-point plateau thanks to all-star forwards Bob McMillan, Guy Chouinard, and acquiring Jean Pronovost from Pittsburgh. They also had a tough rookie defenseman in Brad Marsh, superstar goalie Dan Bouchard. But again, the Flames failed to win a playoff series. Going into the 1979-80 season, Fletcher needed to make changes. Fred Creighton, who had been the team's coach for 5 seasons, was dismissed, and Al McNeil, former head coach of the Habs briefly, who had been running their farm system, joined the team, and they acquired Kent Nilsson, who had been an all-star for the Winnipeg Jets in the WHA, and they drafted top prospect defenseman in Paul Reinhart. But again, despite making the playoffs for the 5th straight year, they lost, and the counterpart Isles began their run of 4 straight Stanley Cups. Hockey in Atlanta, however, was a distant thought, as the Flames were an afterthought in a town with a baseball team who drew big ratings on cable networks, a basketball team who, while not all that great, still doing better attendance-wise, and a football team that looked to be on the rise at least and filling their stadium. So it was off to Calgary, as the city of Calgary had been fighting to obtain an NHL team for a while, and the Flames were an instant hit out west. As a matter of fact, in the 1980-81 season, they reached 92 points, won their first ever playoff series in a sweep over Chicago. They would upset the Flyers in a classic 7-game series, but then fell to Minnesota in 6 games in the semifinals. Either way, this team had finally ignited in the postseason. The new divisional realignment, however, came for the 1981-82 season. The Flames would be put in the Smythe division along with their now hated rivals, the Edmonton Oilers, the Vancouver Canucks, Los Angeles Kings, and the Colorado Rockies. However, after the Rockies moved to New Jersey the following year, the Winnipeg Jets left the Norris division and joined the Smythe. Calgary looked sluggish to start the season, but they made a trade that would change the team forever. They acquired one of the best talents in the game, Lanny McDonald from the Rockies, an Alberta native who Calgary fans instantly gravitated towards. He became the team's leader and best all-around player. The Flames, however, were a step down, it seemed, as Al McNeil resigned as coach but stayed on with the organization. They hired the Badger, Bob Johnson, to whip this team into shape, and despite great production from their star players, such as McDonald and Nilsson, and their young defensemen as Paul Reinhart and Al McInnes, the Flames did indeed finish second in the Smythe to the high-powered Oilers. Despite being dominated by them in 1983, they took them to 7 games in 1984, but the Oilers triumphed and went on to win their first of 2 straight Stanley Cups. By the 1984-85 season, it seemed now the Jets had surpassed the Flames in a little bit way, but Calgary had their best regular season ever at 94 points despite finishing 3rd, but were beaten by Winnipeg in 4 games in a best-of-5 series. By the time the 1985-86 season rolled around, the Flames were seen as contenders but never champions, and some of the Calgary sports media were tiring of Fletcher failing to get this team to a different level. And of course, the trade that allowed Calgary to draft Joe Nieuwendyk sent their all-star center to Minnesota. Well, Nilsson actually flopped in Minnesota, but while Bob Johnson was a great coach with high respect for his players, he needed more depth come playoff time, and Fletcher finally made some big deals. First, he acquired Joe Mullen, a star forward for the St. Louis Blues, coming off back-to-back 40-goal seasons, at 28 at the time of the trade. Also, New York Islanders all-star John Tonelli, a hard-working checking forward who was great at causing turnovers and working the puck along the boards, brings championship experience with 4 Stanley Cup rings to boot, and he could score. The Flames entered the playoffs with 89 points, second place in the Smythe. In addition to Mullen and Tonelli up front, they were led by Lanny, and their beloved hero Calgary, of course, and again, who was beginning to battle injury issues but was still producing when healthy. Dan Quinn, a young talented forward, as well as Swedish import Håkan Loob. Tough two-way man Joel Otto, not a veteran with experience in Stanley Cups, Doug Riseborough, reliable goal scorer Kerry Wilson, and hard-working character players such as Steve Bozek, Perry Berezan, Colin Patterson, and Jim Pawlinski. On defense, a young deep core full of talent, Al McInnes, Paul Reinhart, Jamie McCown, and the NHL's Rookie of the Year that year, Gary Suter. In net, they had another relative rookie, Mike Vernon, who got the call come playoff time over veteran starter, the ever-talented Reggie Lemelin. As I mentioned, they went on a miracle run, sweeping the Jets in 3 straight, and the monster 7-game upset over the 2-time Stanley Cup champion Edmonton Oilers, winning their first battle of Alberta. And despite nearly falling apart, they beat another miracle club, the St. Louis Blues, in 7 games, before falling to another miracle club, 5 games to the Montreal Canadiens, who nearly had a dozen rookies, with a few veterans from their 70s glory years. The team remained intact pretty much going into the 1986-87 season, and they had momentum on their side, indeed the Flames did, and added to the team was Joe's childhood friend Gary Roberts, who was drafted by the Flames in 1984. With 12 games to go in the season, the Flames were looking pretty sharp, as they had also made the move to acquire a scoring-savvy Mike Bullard in exchange for Dan Quinn to Pittsburgh, and they were sitting at 39-27-2 for 80 points, 3 points ahead of the Winnipeg Jets, in a battle for second place in the Smythe, and Edmonton, who usually dominate the Smythe division, was still within reach as well. Joe Nieuwendyk was the type of player Bob Johnson wants in his team, with that American collegiate experience, and he got the call to suit up. on March 10th, 1987 for his first professional game against the Washington Capitals, a pretty good team in their own right, led by superb defense of Larry Murphy, Scott Stevens, and Rod Langway, and up front superstar forward Mike Gartner. The Flames were in the midst of a 4-game road trip, this being their second coming off a win in New York against the Rangers. The Capitals were leading 2-1 in the second period, and on a grinder line, Joe's friend Gary Roberts began the play as the puck went to the stick of Tim Hunter, who sent Joe in on veteran all-star goaltender Pete Peters, and his career goal number 1 in his first game, tying the game at 2-2 en route to a 6-3 Calgary Flames win. He is also a +2. Joe Nieuwendyk had arrived in the NHL. Joe, however, could not muster up much in the next 3 games and was a -2 and was scratched off the roster the following 3 games after that. But after a humiliating 10-1 loss to Winnipeg, Joe was activated once again for a rematch against the Jets. And with the Flames leading 2-1 in the third with nearly 6 minutes remaining, he would score the insurance marker in a 3-1 win. But then on a road game against another division rival, the Los Angeles Kings, with 4:06 to go, he scored the game-winning goal to break a 3-3 tie in a win. 4-3. The Calgary media was slowly but surely changing their stance on Joe Who, by realizing just who he was and what he was all about. He would notch his first assist in a loss against that very Kings team the next game. In a game again with their hated rivals, the Edmonton Oilers, down 2-0, Joe scores a power play goal to give the Flames some life as they fought to a comeback and a 3-3 tie. He scored a goal again in the final game of the season in a loss to Winnipeg. The Flames finished the season 46-31-3 for 95 points, the best regular season in franchise history, finishing in second place. And now Joe was about to get his first shot at playoff hockey. Back in 1987, it was still a divisional format, meaning the Flames at second place would take on third place Winnipeg, who they still had their struggles with during the regular season. As a matter of fact, the Flames went 2-6-0 against their rivals, despite finishing 7 points ahead of them in the standings. However, they wouldn't take this Jets team lightly, as they were led by one of the best in the games at that point in Dale Hawerchuk, as well as forward Paul McLean, two-way forward Thomas Steen, Brian Mullen, grinder Doug Schmale, and a defense all-star Randy Carlyle, Dave Ellett, young Freddie Olesen, and Brad Berry. In net was a rookie tandem who had excited fans in the Peg so much that year that they were named Pokey and the Bandit. Daniel Berthome, easy for me to say, and Pokey Reddick, coached by Dan Maloney. Game 1. In Calgary, the standalone fans of the city itself believe this team is even better than the team that made it all the way to the final last year. Could they take Edmonton? But are they overlooking the Jets, a team that had their number all season? The Jets took an early 1-0 lead, but on the power play in the first period, Joe is sent out to play on the unit. Kariel Orana gets the puck to Joe, who then sees Mike Bullard in prime position, sets him up for a beauty. The game is tied 1-1. The Flames would take a 2-1 lead, but fall apart later on. Joe played pretty well for the most part, but was dominated in the faceoff circle and was a -2. It will be a 4-2 loss for the Flames. Game 2, the Flames need to refocus in a game that was nearly combined 80 minutes in penalties. All goals were scored in the second period. The Flames struck first, and the Jets took a 2-1 lead. The Flames tied it. The Jets took a lead with 1 second left to play in the second, and the Flames just could not muster up anything. Joe was a -1 with 2 shots on goal. Now the Flames are in a terrible position, down 2-0, heading to Winnipeg. For Game 3, the Flames activated another young rookie who played in a couple games last year's Cup final, Brett Hull. It looked bad. The Jets took a 2-0 lead, but they got back in the game just 1:08 later, and on a power play, our hero Joe Nieuwendyk took command of the ship, who was on the top line getting it to Bullard to Joe Mullen. The Flames tie it, and after the first period, it was tied 2-2. But the superb goaltending of Berthome for the Jets, and that great Flames defense of McKinnon, Suter, McCowan, and Reinhart kept the Jets at bay. We're off to OT. And it is indeed Mike Bullard who gets the goal, as Hull helps assist on it for his first playoff point of his career, and the Flames have life at last with a huge win. Game 4 in the Peg looked great as the Flames took a 2-0 lead early, but the Jets tied it by the second, and then took a 4-2 lead in the third. With 2:44 to go, Joe works his magic. He scores. The Flames trail by a goal. They still have a chance, but it's a 4-3 loss. The Flames are on the verge of elimination, heading back home. The Calgary media is all over the Flames and how they play this entire series, despite the close nature of some of the games. And in Calgary, the Flames faithful still have hope. They lead 2-1 after 2. And then Suter says in our hero, who controls the puck like few others, and scores to give Calgary a 3-1 lead. They did let the lead slip, but went on to win 4-3 and stay in this thing. Game 6 back in Winnipeg, and it's an utter disaster. Mike Vernon is lit up, and he is pulled. Joe has no shots on goal, is ineffective, much like the rest of the team, to be fair. The Jets win 6-1 and take the series in 6 games. What looked to be a huge playoff for Calgary was a letdown. Joe, however, was one of the better forwards in this round, despite being a -2. He was second on the team in points with 2 goals to assist for 4 points total, only behind Bullard. The big key to the Jets' win was shutting down Joe Mullen. The Jets would, however, get swept by the mighty Oilers, who would go on to regain the top of the Stanley Cup throne, winning their 3rd Stanley Cup in 4 seasons. And who was on that Stanley Cup team? Kent Nilsson. Nieuwendyk's regular season of playing 9 total games saw him notch 5 goals and an assist for 6 points. Not a bad way to make an impact late in this season. Of those 5 goals, how fitting is it that his close friend, rookie Gary Roberts, assisted on all but one of them. The only goal he assisted on was to Flames top scorer Joe Mullen, and he collaborated on that assist with defenseman Jamie McCown. While the season ended in disappointment in his 9 regular season games and 6 playoff games, Joe Nieuwendyk showed he was an NHL guy through and through. And with his efforts, he was ready to be a full-time member of the main roster for this talented club in what would be his first official rookie season. And now that brings us to that very rookie season of 1987-88, but the Flames made a huge change. Bob Johnson in the offseason parted ways with the team to take the job as president of Hockey USA, which was a growing program. In his place, the Flames hired Terry Crisp as the new head coach, a reliable grinding center who journeyed throughout the NHL and was part of the infamous Broad Street Bullies of Philadelphia Flyers and their 2 Stanley Cup wins. He started as an assistant in Philadelphia and then went on to have a successful tenure coaching the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds in the OHL. He has spent 2 seasons coaching the Flames farm team, the AHL's Moncton Golden Flames, helping players develop such as Brett Hull and Gary Roberts. However, Crisp was known for being hot-tempered, volatile, taking his criticism of his players to another level. But how would our hero fare in this story? After all, Johnson was a fan of his style, and Crisp could utilize it. But with tremendous puck control, great face-off abilities, and his goal-scoring prowess, he added to an already strong Flames lineup deep at many ends. Joe made his impact felt pretty quick. On October 14, 1987, he scored 2 goals against the high-powered Oilers, notched the 2 markers past goalie Grant Fuhr. But the biggest day came on October 18th when hosting the Boston Bruins. He notched his first career hat-trick. Despite the loss, Nieuwendyk was picked as the game's first star. He finished the month of October overall with 11 points in 11 games and was a +3. But the Flames themselves were 5-5-1, seen as a disappointing start for the club. But things were about to pick up. On November 19, Joe Nieuwendyk was controlling the puck so much that it was frustrating the Quebec Nordiques and letting up goaltenders Mario Brunetta and Mario Gosselin in a Flames 9-1 win where our hero already notched his second career hat-trick with 4 goals, 3 of them on the power play, as Joe was helping improve what was already a strong extra-man unit. By the end of November, he had 23 points in 23 games, still averaging a point a game as the Flames started to really come alive that month. The hockey media mostly had their eyes and hype on Pierre Turgeon for his rookie season in Buffalo, but Joe was stealing the show. December, it just got better. 4 goals once again, this time against Buffalo on December 13th in a 7-1 win on the road as Turgeon's head was left spinning as this man once called Joe Who was making the world well aware of who he is. Oh, but he wasn't done there. I've seen the Flames shock the high-powered Habs the 9-3 win. Joe? 4th hat-trick of the year already, plus an assist for a 4-point night. Vincent Riendo and all-star Patrick Waugh saw the red light more than a traffic jam in New York. The NHL record was 7, shared by Cy Denneny and Joe Malone in the 1917-18 season, the first in the NHL. The one who came closest in the modern era, however, was Miroslav Frischer in 1981-82. The very next game on New Year's Eve, Joe had a 3-point night with a goal and 2 assists in a thrilling 5-4 win over against the defending Wales Conference champs, the Philadelphia Flyers, including notching a helper on Gary Suter's game winner on the power play with 8 seconds to play. With 13 goals, 6 assists, and 19 points in 12 games for the month, the talk of the Calder Trophy for Rookie of the Year surrounded our hero, and the Flames were taking hold of the Smythe Division as Edmonton were now the ones chasing them after all these years. And January was indeed a celebratory new year for Joe. 11 goals, 12 assists, 23 points in 14 games, and a big +8. As the Flames continue to blaze through the competition, 2 goals and 1 assist for 3 points against the Jets. 2 games later did the same against the Capitals, and the big hits kept on coming as Joe's setup game was getting even better, and he was leading rushes, 1 goal and 3 assists for 4 points on January 19th against the Canucks. The very next game, 2 goals and assists against the Kings. 2 games later, 2 goals against the Leafs. Any professional athlete could let this kind of early success go to their heads, but not Joe. He remained humble through and through, with the team's veterans keeping him grounded. February, however, saw a bad start for the Flames, dropping 3 straight. They also began an 11-game road trip due to the 1988 Winter Olympics being held in Calgary. Come the NHL All-Star break, however, Joe Nieuwendyk in his rookie year, a man who was not supposed to be a star, made it to the All-Star Showcase on February 9th, 1988 in St. Louis. He was one of 5 Calgary Flames to make it, as an amazing defense saw great representation. Al MacInnis made his second appearance, as did Gary Suter. Also, defenseman Brad McCrimmon, who had just joined the team this season after 5 successful seasons in Philly that included 2 Cup Finals appearances, was having a better year and obtained his first ever selection, as did goaltender Mike Vernon. And his game had matured a great deal. Joe Nieuwendyk assisted on the first goal of the game, but the Camels would lose 6-5 thanks to an amazing 6-point night from Mario Lemieux of the Wales Conference. February, however, would be a rough month for the Flames. That 11-game road trip selling off 5-5-1. Not terrible, not great, but Edmonton actually failed to capitalize on the Flames slump, but did close the gap to 3 points in first place. The Flames were eagerly awaiting their first Smythe Division championship. February was the only month that wasn't one to celebrate for our hero, but it was nothing to sneeze at with 10 points in 12 games, but he was a -4, and did have a 3-point night against Dale Hunter and the Washington Capitals on Valentine's Day. But March going into April was a much better month for Joe and the Flames as a whole, as they regained their composure and went on a tear to end the season. Another huge win over Edmonton that saw Joe notch a goal and 2 assists for 3 points in a 7-4 win. But a big milestone came on March 12th. In a 10-4 win over the Sabres, not only did he have yet another 3-point night with 2 goals and an assist, but his second goal of the game, a power play goal marker scored on Tom Barrasso, Joe Nieuwendyk became the second rookie in NHL history to score 50 goals in a season. The first was Hall of Famer Mike Bossy, who reached 53 in 1977-78. With 10 games left in the season, there was no doubt Joe could break it. He got a step closer in a win on the road against the Boston Bruins. Another 3-point night with a goal and 2 helpers against Ray Bourque and company. However, Joe went into a minor slump to end the season, which is 3 assists and no goals in his final 8 games. But it didn't matter, as the Calgary Flames, for the first time since the new divisional realignment, won first place in the Smythe Division, finishing 48, 23, and 9 for 105 points, their best season in franchise history. And not only that, it was the best record in the entire NHL, earning the Flames the President's Trophy. And Joe was a major reason for this success. What a season by any player, let alone a rookie. I should mention that the Flames made a puzzling move at around the trade deadline, however, trading another rookie who was having a really good year, Brett Hull, to the St. Louis Blues for Rick Wamsley to strengthen backup goaltending, and Rob Ramage because they thought their defense needed more strength, I guess. And okay, Jerry Chris was allegedly all for this trade, and Cliff, well, I mean, he made the trade, but regardless, it's playoff time. Awaiting the Flames in the opening round was an upstart Los Angeles Kings team who finished with just 30 wins and a mere 68 points. But make no mistake about it, this was a growing team with amazing young talent. Sophomore Luca Robitaille was already proving to be among the best left wingers in that game, while teammate Jimmy Carson in his second season as well notched 55 goals. You also had Bernie Nichols, who was just getting into his best years, and seasoned veteran Dave Taylor provided great leadership and could still score here and there. He also had reliable, hardworking forwards such as Jim Fox and Bob Carpenter. Their defense, however, wasn't much to write home about it, but sophomore Steve Duchesne had an excellent year. In net, they had former All-Star Rolly Melanson and Glenn Healy, and were coached by former WHA All-Star Robbie Fatorak. Game 1. At the Saddledome, the Flames fans truly believe this is the year. And it wasn't even close for Game 1. The Flames scorched the Kings 9-2. Our hero was the one who made it 7-2 on a power play goal set up by Al MacInnis, and Game 1 was in the books. Game 2, it's a power play, and it's Suter in control of the Joe, who keeps the puck like only he can, but can't find an opening to the net. But he feeds it to Reinhardt, who slaps it home to open up the scoring early. But the Kings are a much more determined bunch in this game. Even Calgary led 4-1 at one point. The Kings closed the gap to 4-3 after 2 periods, but Calgary escapes with a 6-4 win and a 2-0 series lead. We are heading to Hollywood for Game 3. It was pure carnage, nearly 150 combined penalty minutes. Our hero doesn't play well, was pointless and a -2 as the Kings fought hard to a 5-2 win to stay in the series. Game 4, however, was a different story. The Flames took a 2-0 lead quick, led 5 minutes into the contest, and just past the midway point of the period, it's Joe to his pal Gary as Roberts makes it 3-0 en route to a 7-3 win for Calgary, putting the Kings on the verge of elimination. Game 5 back home at the Dome. The crowd is amped and 4 minutes in. Extra man advantage. Nieuwendyk is wheeling. He's dealing. He finds Lube, who scored the goal to open up the game. The Flames were clinging to a 3-2 lead after 2 periods, but ran away with it. They'd go on to win the game 6-4 and take the series in 5. Joe got his first taste of playoff success, and he certainly did lend a big hand with a goal and 3 helpers, but was a -2, as the stars of the series were clearly defensemen McGinnis and Suter, as well as Lube, who was having a career as a whole. Either way, our hero is off to the Smythe Division final, along with his team. And it was very little surprise awaiting them was the defending Stanley Cup champion Edmonton Oilers as the Battle of Alberta Part 4 was ready to commence. The Oilers won the first battle pretty easily, but the second battle in 1984 took 7 games for the Oilers to stop the underdog Flames. And of course, the most recent one was the infamous 1986 battle where the Flames shocked the world and derailed the Oilers' bid for a 3rd straight cup. However, the media throughout the hockey world was kind of mixed on the Oilers. Many, including a lot of naysayers, learned their lesson years ago and said the Oilers can very well win this thing. 99 points is nothing to sneeze at, but it is the first time they did finish under 100 points since the 1980-81 season. There was unrest internally with GM and coach Glenn Sather and his players and the ownership of Peter Pocklington. Many were unhappy, including superstar defenseman Paul Coffey, who left the team, was traded to Pittsburgh, but they caught Greg Simpson in return, who had a great year, as I mentioned earlier. The man himself, Wayne Gretzky, missed 16 games due to injury and lost a scoring title for the first time since his first NHL season, and also lost league MVP for the first time ever. Curry and Messier, however, were still producing. Glenn Anderson faced some unfair critique, but Esa the Pest Tikkanen was growing in his value to the team, as were role players such as Mike Krushelnyski, Craig McTavish, and Kevin McClellan. They were still very much key. Even with the loss of Coffey, the defense still had a lot of talent, including all-star Kevin Lowe, Charlie Huddy, Steve Smith, and Marty McSorley, who doubled as a forward. In net, Graham Fuhr had a sensational year, the best of his career, as a matter of fact, winning his first Vezina trophy as the league's top goaltender. The Oilers had just disposed of the Jets in 5 games. But was it the Flames' times at last? Well, some sure think so. So here we go. What will our hero do in this huge series? Game 1, the atmosphere in the Saddledome is at a fever pitch. The electricity can be cut with a knife, but it's not good for our hero. He gets hurt early in the game. The prognosis of his return is doubtful. The Flames don't have much. Their top guns are disarmed. Fuhr is a marvel in net, and the Oilers take Game 1, 3-1. Sadly, the news is even worse for Game 2. Nieuwendyk is out. But the Flames look good early. They had a 2-0 lead and later a 3-1 lead, but they let it slip. It was tied 4-4 after regulation. The Flames were on a power play, but Gretzky went in alone and fired a shot on Vernon for an infamous goal. The Oilers now took a 2-0 series lead heading back home. This is a disaster. Game 3, our hero returns, and he is sorely needed. The Flames, however, are treading water and trailing 3-1 after 2. But then defenseman Rick Natras tries to start something. Gets the puck to Poplinski to do Nieuwendyk. He scores. Steps up, and the Flames are trying to desperately get back in this thing, but they don't. They lose 4-2. This has been terrible and utterly humiliating. The Flames are on the verge of being swept, and their big guns again had not produced whatsoever. And for reasons only known to him, Terry Chris benched the most playoff-savvy player on this team, John Tonelli, who really wasn't playing all that bad. Game 4, can our hero do anything to try and help maybe start pulling off a miracle? Nope. The Flames find themselves down 4-0, but the Flames break the shutout as Joe helps Poplinski set up Danny Merzen for a goal. It's 4-2. But after the Oilers make it 5-2, 1:12 later, Mullen to Reinhardt to Nieuwendyk. He scored, and it's 5-3. But the Flames' season would be over by the end of the third period, losing 6-4, an utterly embarrassing sweep that on paper looked like it was going to be a classic series for the ages. The Oilers went on to win their second set of back-to-back championships and their 4th in 5 seasons. Joe missed most of Game 1 and all of Game 2, but it seemed with the Flames back against the wall, he was the only one to step up. His 3 points are actually tied for the team lead and was a +2. That's really sad in itself. The all-star defense was nowhere to be found. Joe Mullen was inconsistent, as was Lube. Mike Bullard was god-awful in this series, pretty much sealing his fate in Calgary. Terry Chris and his coaching methods took quite a bit of criticism, as the issues with Tonelli would lead to the veteran playoff warrior leaving the team. Mike Vernon was also chastised, as he didn't play overly well. Joe really is the one player who came to play in this series. Just makes you wonder if things would have been different if he was healthy in those first 2 games. Joe Nieuwendyk's rookie season was one for the ages. 51 goals, 41 assists for 92 points. He was put on a top scoring line with Mike Bullard and Hakan Lube, and boy did it pay off. But it's his chemistry with offensive blue liners who helped Joe rush in with the puck. Gary Suter and Al MacInnis, as Suter assisted on 19 of the 51 goals Joe scored, while MacInnis assisted on 17. But it was his chemistry with Swedish import Hakan Lube, who also had a 50-goal season, as Joe assisted on 18 of Lube's goals, and the two collaborated on 8 assists together, while Lube actually assisted on 18 of Joe's goals himself, coming in second in that category. The chemistry of Bullard was there as well, teaming up for 24 goals one way or another, but when shifted with good friend Gary Roberts, they still had something going as well. Nieuwendyk dominated rookie scoring, of course, with his 51 goals, also led all rookies with 41 assists for that huge 92-point season, winning the rookie scoring lead by a margin of 27 points, as the closest to him was Ray Shepard of the Sabres. Former teammate Brett Hull finished third in scoring, rookie scoring I should say. Also, Joe's 92 points put him in the top 20 leaders in the league. Also, his 51 goals were 5th best in the entire league, and oh, look at this company he's in there with, it's pretty damn good. To this day, as of 2023, Nieuwendyk is still one of only 4 rookies to reach 50 goals. He came up just short of Mike Bossy's record, but of course in the 1992-93 season, Teemu Selanne obliterated the record with his infamous 76-goal season. Since then, however, Alexander Ovechkin in 05-06 has been the only rookie to reach the mark. Oh, and Joe Nieuwendyk was the league leader in power play goals in his rookie year with 31, just 2 ahead of Michel Goulet of the Quebec Nordiques. A huge accomplishment. And on top of that, was tied for 3rd with 8 game-winning goals on the year with Pat Verbeek and Craig Simpson, and also had 3 shorthanded goals on the year. He really could do it all. So I guess with all these accomplishments, that would surely mean... Yes! Joe Nieuwendyk wins the Calder Trophy for the league's top rookie, dominating with over 300 votes. It was no contest, really, but the man who wasn't supposed to be a star became one overnight, and he walked home with his prize to show the world what he was all about. And hey, on top of that, he was a finalist for the Lady Byng Trophy, coming in 3rd for voting with 45 votes. The award went to Mats Naslund of the Montreal Canadiens. Joe Who had arrived in Calgary, and everyone knew his name. He had become an overnight sensation with his pure skill, hustle, and ability to score goals in key situations. His name was now one that resounded among the Calgary faithful, a multi-dimensional player who could be relied on in any situation. Certainly it helped an already talented Flames club ascend further up the ladder, but make no mistake about it, if Calgary is going to have any success in the future, Joe Nieuwendyk was going to be a cornerstone of making it happen. Entering the 1988-89 season, a lot of eyes were on our hero. Would there be a sophomore jinx, or would his game continue to improve? The Flames' playoff heartbreak caused Cliff Fletcher to make some big moves. As I alluded to earlier, Mike Bullard was gone, meaning our hero was losing a line mate. But, in return, trading Bullard meant they would obtain All-Star Doug Gilmour from the St. Louis Blues. The team also parted ways with All-Star defenseman Paul Reinhart, who had missed most of the season due to injury. And also John Tonelli had left the team and signed as a free agent with the Los Angeles Kings, joining Wayne Gretzky, who had arrived there after the most shocking and biggest trade in NHL history. The Flames were still the biggest odds-on favorite in preseason to win it all. However, would coach Terry Crisp, despite his faults, lead this team to the next path? We're about to find out what our pal Joe could do all about it. Joe got off to a pretty good start, as did the Flames. He had 11 points in 12 games in the month of October, and was a +2. And pardon pun, but the Flames were scorching the competition come November. On November 10th, Joe scored a huge overtime goal in an exciting win over the Philadelphia Flyers that would kick off a 13-game unbeaten streak that included 12 wins for the Flames. Joe was at his best. 2 goals against the Whalers on November 19th. 1 week later, scoring the game-winning goal in a 4-1 win over Gretzky and that highly improved Los Angeles Kings club. And then back-to-back 2-goal games. First in the only tie of this streak against the Canucks on the 29th, and did the same 2 days later, 6-3 over the Rangers. The next game, a goal and assist against the Oilers, and then the game after that, 2 assists against the Jets. 8 points in those 4 games, averaging 2 a game. In this 13-game streak, Joe had 12 goals, 4 assists for 16 points, and was a big +8. Things were about to get even better for our hero. In a special Boxing Day game, he had 2 goals and an assist over the Canucks in a clutch performance where he scored the tying goal in the OT winner. And then had another 3-point night, a goal and 2 helpers, and a dominant win over the Quebec Nordiques on January 3rd. But the biggest night of his career at that point came on January 11 when the Flames dominated the lowly Winnipeg Jets 8-3 at home. The Jets did strike first, but Joe tied it on a power play. The Flames led 3-1 early in the second, and while killing a penalty, a short-handed goal by Nieuwendyk makes it 4-1. The Jets got one back, but then McInnes anchors, Mullen takes the wheel, and Nieuwendyk drives it home. Hat trick and another power play marker. 2 more goals. Thank you very much. A 5-goal night after, of course, being named the first star of the game. The humble youngster who, again, was not touted as a star, received a standing ovation from the Calgary faithful. And he just kept rolling in a tight game against the determined Canucks squad. Joe scored a goal to tie with 1:31 to go, securing him another 3-point night as he had 2 helpers as well. And in the very next game on January 31st, a hat trick, short-handed, even strength, empty netter, an amazing trifecta of different goals. He can do it all, and it resulted in a win over the Kings. No sophomore jinx for this youngster. So to no surprise, Joe made his second straight NHL All-Star game. One of 4 Flames selected along with him was Joe Mullen, who was having a spectacular year, actually making his first All-Star appearance despite being one of the league's better players for quite some time. Gary Suter making his 3rd consecutive All-Star appearance, and Mike Vernon, like Joe, made his 2nd. Our hero had 2 assists in a 9-5 win for the Campbell Conference, breaking their All-Star losing streak at 5. Mullen, however, should have been MVP with 2 goals and a helper, but the game was in Edmonton, so the sympathy vote went to Gretzky because they missed him so much, and they still loved him even though he's playing in LA. Anyway, back to business. Joe struggled somewhat in the near month following the All-Star break, going into a slump which was 5 points in 11 games. While he broke that slump with a vengeance on March 7 with 2 goals and an assist over the Jets. In the very next game, a huge one. 10-3 win over the Pittsburgh Penguins, where they schooled Mario Lemieux as Joe outplayed the Phenom, who's having one of the greatest seasons in NHL history. 2 goals and 3 assists for 5 points and was the first star of the game, garnering another huge ovation from the Stampede Star faithful of Calgary. And on March 21st, the same night, the team's captain and idol Lanny McDonald scored his 500th career goal. Joe reached 50 goals again this season with the win over the Islanders. Joe was one of the main reasons the Flames just couldn't be stopped in the regular season. They had a record of 54 wins, just 17 losses, and 9 ties for a monster 117 points. Their best season ever once again. They won the Smythe Division, of course, for a 2nd straight year and had the best record in the NHL, meaning they once again won the President's Trophy. But now the real test was coming, as now it's playoff time. And awaiting them in the first round, a team not expected to be in the playoffs in any way, shape, or form, even for the Smythe semi-final, the Vancouver Canucks. The Canucks had missed the playoffs the last 2 seasons, and they haven't had a winning regular season record since the 1975-76 season, one of only 2 in franchise history, I might add. They did, however, make it all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals in 1982 in a miracle run, with an opening round win over Calgary, but the Flames dominated them twice instead in the playoffs in the next 2 seasons. The Canucks finished 33, 39, and 8 with just, 74 points, but were showing some improvements. General manager Pat Quinn had started trying to build a winning club, and coach Brad McGammon was trying his best to guide them. But the fact is, they're over 40 points behind the Flames. The Canucks only beat the Flames once in 8 games, but tied them twice and were competitive with them most of the season. Their hope for the future was first-round pick Trevor Linden, who had a tremendous rookie year. Petri Skriko was a prominent goal scorer, and despite declining contribution, Tony Tandy was still key to the team. And also grinding the efforts of Rich Sutter, as well as former Flames forward Steve Bozak, and team captain and longtime fan favorite Stan Smil. Their defense was led by legendary Flame Paul Reinhart, as well as Jim Benning, Doug Lidster, and veteran Harold Sneps. But in net is where the key was, as Kirk McLean, a 22-year-old prospect, was the one turning heads that year at the Pacific Coliseum. But this should be pretty easy for the Flames, right? Well, here we go! Game 1. The Saddle Dome was packed to the gills, and indeed it was the goaltenders who were shining the most. McLean and Vernon were turning back shot after shot, but each team got one in the first. It was 1-1 after 1. With the game tied 2-2 in the second, our pal Joseph, along with some kid named Theo Fleury in his rookie season, who was starting to make an impact, both set up Jamie McCown for a goal. The Flames lead 3-2 after 2, but for the life of them, they just couldn't solve Kirk McLean, and the Canucks managed to tie at 3-3, and we're off to OT. Just under 3 minutes in, however, Paul Reinhart stuck it to the fans who once cheered for him for many years, and his former team scoring the OT winner to a course of booze. The Canucks shocked the Flames in the hockey world by even winning this one game. The media is crucifying Terry Crisp for this one. Game 2 was a different story, however, as tensions, of course, boiled with a combined 86 penalty minutes. The Flames were in full control, however. Our hero was contained quite a bit and held to just 2 shots, but in the end, the Calgary takes it 5-2, ties the series at 1 as we ship to Vancouver. Game 3 at the Pacific Coliseum, the Canucks fans in the stands are in full force, and it's a tight, grinding game where both teams defensively were keeping each other in check. It was scoreless after 1 period. Enter our hero. Early in the second, Joe began a play which got the puck to his pal, Gary Roberts, who set up Lube for a goal. The Flames draw first strike. And then on the power play, the little giant Theo Fleury sees the power play master in prime position. It's a goal for our guy. The Flames lead 2-0. The defense did the rest. The Flames got a couple more. Vernon gets the shutout. 4-0 win. A 2-1 series lead. Clearly the first game was underdog team beginner's luck, which we see all the time. Man alive, our hero was great in this one, however. Game 4, the Flames got a little too comfortable, and the Canucks took advantage and took a 3-0 lead after 2 periods, and Vernon was pulled from the game. The Flames made a bid for a comeback, but our hero, despite scoring a goal with 21 seconds left, didn't play overly well, and the goalie made his 5-3 loss look slightly better. Another shock, the Canucks tie the series as we head back to Calgary. The Flames look much more disciplined in Game 5 as it's Lube to McCrimmon to Joe Nieuwendyk. It's 1-0 early in the first. Vernon and the defense shine once again. The Flames had a few more. 4-0 win at home, and the Flames are hoping to wrap this series up on the road. Game 6, we are back on the coast, but Canucks fans still have faith, and it would be a disaster. Crisp is losing it constantly on the bench. Our hero plays very poorly. Scoreless in a -3, a 6-3 loss for the Flames. Kirk McLean was frustrating everyone. We're going to Game 7? How is this happening? And I will say this. Terry Crisp deserved the blame he got for a lot of this happening. His hot-headedness and anger towards his own players was getting way too extreme. But that being said, the players themselves just seem to get lazy in certain games. So here we go. The Flames are up against the wall. The fickle hockey media is saying this team isn't the real deal, and they never were. It's tense but loud on the Saddledome for Game 7. But our hero and the rest of the team are going to fight for this one, taking their underdog adversaries a little more seriously. But McLean frustrates them as he shines a net. But so does Vernon early, who's making some epic saves. But it's power play time. Our friend Lube gets it to Al. And after a failed goal attempt, it slides to the crease as Joe Nieuwendyk puts it home. Midway through the first period, the Flames strike first, sending the Dome into a frenzy. The Flames would lead 2-1 after 1, and then 3-2 after 2. The Canucks were keeping up with them. Vernon held his own, but the Canucks tied it, and McLean had become a wall, and we're going to overtime. The Flames' dream season could become a nightmare. OT was a roller coaster. Every fan in the arena let out a collective gasp every time Vernon had to make an epic save. They roared when they thought they saw McLean, but as OT was winding down, Luke carries the puck into the neutral zone. Poplinski launches it on net, deflecting out Gelato. It's a goal! The Flames take it in 7. And the shot of Terry Crisp looking more relieved than happy is saying something. But the Flames survived a determined underdog team and perhaps wiser for it. A good series for our hero. 4 goals, 2 assists, 6 points, and a +1 despite a rough outing in Game 6. He rebounded big time with a tremendous effort in the deciding game, saving his best for that night. Awaiting the Flames in the second round, a revamped Los Angeles Kings squad, a lot different from the team they dominated last year as the Kings achieved their first winning record in 4 seasons, and just their third in 10 years, finishing with 91 points, and a large reason for that was because now some guy named Gretzky joining them after a monster trade. And no, he won his 9th Hart Trophy as League MVP in 10 years. Bernie Nichols, who had always been among the top talents in NHL during his career, scored 70 goals and 80 helpers for 150 points. Before that, his career highs were 46 goals, 61 assists, and 100 points even. Insane. Throw in Luke Robitaille, who had another great year. And then you have former Flame John Tonelli, who would love nothing more than to stick it to Crisp and Fletcher and his former team, as he added 30 goals to depth to the club. You also had the leadership, again, of veteran all-star Dave Taylor, and more role players in the club. Again, Bob Carpenter, now Mike Krushelnytsky joined his buddy Gretzky, Ron Duguay, and acquiring two-way forward Steve Casper from Boston. Their defense was still growing, led by Steve Deschênes, but the additions of veteran Doug Crossman and tough Marty McSorley helped a great deal. In goal, they had a very talented duo of Glenn Healy and just recently acquired from the Islanders, Kelly Hrudey. Coached by Robbie Fatorik, this Kings team was a force as Gretzky helped them stun his former team, the defending Stanley Cup champion Oilers, in 7 games, coming back from a 3-1 deficit. Game 1 at the Saddledome, and the Flames faithful are hopeful this series against the Canucks didn't take too much out of their boys. Our hero had 3 shots on goal, but Rudy turned all of them away, and it looked bleak. As the Kings were leading 3-2 as time was running out, however, Gary Roberts scored with 1:36 to play to send the crowd into a frenzy, and we're off to overtime. We're nearly 8 minutes in. Gilmore helps the Flames take Game 1. Now for Game 2 was a much different story, but it did once again, however, favor the Flames. They took the Kings apart, and leading 3-0 in the first period. Oh, what do I hear that we have? Oh, it's a power play. Oh, yeah, we have Nieuwendyk to Lube to Al, who slaps it home. McInnes makes it 4-1 for the Flames after one, en route to a huge 8-3 win. Big games from Mullen and Gilmore, and the Flames take a 2-0 series lead, headed to Hollywood. Game 3, however, the Inglewood faithful at the Forum believe in their new hero, number 99. But the Flames are just too good. 5-2 win, another big night for Gilmore. Game 4, and our hero has no goals in this series so far, which is somewhat surprising considering how dominant the Flames have been in these last 2 games. And they're going for the sweep. Tied 2-2 as the second period is winding down. It's a power play, you say. Oh, so we got to Mr. Rob Ramage, who passes out to Sir Gary Roberts to King Joe, who crowned the Kings with a power play marker. His first goal of the series, 5th of the playoffs. 3-2 Flames lead, and they never looked back. A 5-3 win, a series sweep for only the 3rd time in their history, and the first time since 1986. The Calgary Flames are off to the Campbell Conference Final, 1 series away from the Stanley Cup. Joe was somewhat invisible in this series, but once again, another power play goal in a series clinching game made all the difference, and he was still contributing in ways that were much needed to this club. The story of this series, however, was the play of Gilmore, Roberts, and Mullen. However, awaiting them in the conference finals, in the Campbell Conference Finals, were a team that nobody expected to be there, the Chicago Blackhawks. The Hawks were an abysmal 27-41-12 for just 66 points, but this being the divisional playoff era, this was somewhat a common occurrence in the 80s and into the early 90s. Terrible teams making the playoffs, and as a rare occasion, they'll make a miracle run and prove that they're actually better than their record suggests. The Hawks did have a new coach that year, Maniac Mike Keenan, who left Philadelphia after 4 seasons and 2 Cup Finals appearances. The man was a self-serving tyrant, but he knew how to find success. The Hawks were plagued with injuries throughout the regular season, I should point out. Denny Savard missed 22 games, but the superstar forward was still productive when healthy. Steve Larmer was left to pick up the load and achieve the 40-goal season. Clutch forward Steve Thomas missed 35 games, but they still had a strong lineup, stronger than their record might suggest, as they had the leadership and hard work of Dirk Graham, the greatness of Dwayne Sutter, who had vast playoff experience, also Wayne Presley, and a scoring grinder in Troy Murray. And they added a young prospect for the playoffs, named Jeremy Roenick. On defense, they had all-star Doug Wilson, a young yet still tough Dave Manson, Trent Yanni, and veteran Keith Brown. Goaltending, however, wasn't the strongest, as Alan Chevier had gotten them through these playoffs, and Darren Pang showed promise the year prior. The Hawks had shocked Stevie Y in the Wings as well as Brett Hull in the Blues to get here. This is their 4th conference final appearance this decade, but they haven't made the Stanley Cup final since 1973. But the Flames learned not to take teams lightly after the Canucks series. Let's see what our hero does here. Game 1, a salad at the Saddledome, of course, and the Flames' defense and checkers are keeping the Hawks grounded. And they lead 1-0 after 1. And hey, we got a power play. And Al McInnes starts it, and Joe ends up with a goal. 2-0 Flames lead en route to a 3-0 win. Game 2, however, the Hawks stun the Flames, taking a 3-0 lead 6 minutes into the game. The Hawks would take the game 4-2 and tie the series. Our hero wasn't very effective and only making 2 shots on goal. The series shifts to Chicago, and those loud, ruckus Chicago Stadium fans are shaking the core of the building in excitement for the improbability to happen. It was a game that was rough to the core. 187 combined penalty minutes. However, Flames led it 1-0 early on, and late in the period, an extra man advantage. Tick, Al, tack, Ramage, Nieuwendyk. Yes, his 7th goal these playoffs. The Flames lead 2-0 after 1. Gilmore, McInnes, and Mullen played the champs they are, and the Flames take a 2-1 series lead. Game 4, we're still in Chicago. It was the goalies putting on a show, as Vernon and Chevier making spectacular saves. Each team scored a goal in the second period, and it remained 1-1 after regulation. At 15 minutes into overtime, Al McInnes puts the Flames 1 game away from making the finals. So here we go. Game 5. Our hero is a step closer to a dream coming true. He's been a power play monster. What will we see from him? The Saddle Dome has never been louder as they are ready for their boys to make it to the big dance. 7.5 minutes into the game, our hero takes a feed from lineman Hockenlube and opens the scoring, sending fans into a joyful frenzy. But after that, Chevrier is standing on his head. The Hawks managed to tie this 1-1 after 2. A Brian McClellan goal made it 2-1 for the Flames, however, and the tension was mounting. Chicago was creating more rushes as time was winding down, but with about 3 minutes to play. Al to Patterson to Joe Nieuwendyk. The place explodes. They know what's going to happen. Time ticks down. Celebrations begin. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. The Calgary Flames are going to the Stanley Cup Finals for the second time in 4 seasons, and for 22-year-old Joe Nieuwendyk in his second full season, the very first time. Joe again was a marvel on the power play. He's one of the most dangerous power play makers in these playoffs, and his performance in clinching games in this postseason was outstanding. His performance in Game 5 was outstanding as he and his team to the promised land. But now the question remained, can they conquer said land? And now the Holy Grail is within reach. Joe Nieuwendyk, like many kids who grew up in Canada loving hockey year after year, who watched the likes of Yvan Cournoyer, Bobby Clarke, Denny Potvin, and Wayne Gretzky watch hoisting the ultimate prize and dream of having his name join so many greats on that Stanley Cup. It could finally come true. He's even helped defeat the great Gretzky to get his chance. And he's alongside a man who he grew up watching, Lanny McDonald. Joe Nieuwendyk, at 11 years old, saw Lanny score an infamous goal as a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs in overtime of Game 7 in the quarterfinal series, upsetting the Islanders in 1978. Lanny is now in his 16th season, has built a Hall of Fame career, and is team captain of these Flames, and is working hard to achieve the one thing he hasn't got, and that's a championship. Joe Nieuwendyk drew from that inspirational leader. The entire team looked up to him, and now it's time for our hero and his team to seize the chance. But it won't come easy. Indeed, it would be a rematch of the 1986 Stanley Cup Final. And while Joe wasn't there, many of his teammates were, and remember the crushing defeat, but both teams made Cinderella runs to that final. However, both were much different years later. The Habs, who were full of rookies that year, were a little older, a little wiser, and much more dominant. They finished with 115 points, just 2 less than Calgary, the second best team in the league. On paper, you couldn't ask for a more even matchup for these finals. Habs had 7 players reach 20 or more goals, led by all-star forwards Mats Naslund and the playoff savvy Bobby Smith. You have the hard-working Russ Courtnall, two-way superstar Guy Carbonneau, the gritty Shane Corson, clutch superstar and playoff warrior Claude Lemieux, and the speedy Stéphane Richer. They also had other character players such as Mike Keane, Mike McPhee, seasoned veteran Ryan Walter, and of course, team captain, 16-year vet and holder of 5 Stanley Cup rings, arguably the best defensive forward of all time at that point, Bob Gainey. Defense was the name of the game for the Habs as well. Norris Trophy winner Chris Chelios led the way. Check import Peter Svoboda, stay-at-home specialist Craig Ludwig and Rick Green, and of course 17-year veteran, 6 Stanley Cups, future Hall of Famer Larry Robinson. And in net, the kid that turned the hockey world on its head in 1986 with his heroics. Now with a little more experience under his belt, the league's Vezina Trophy winner is a top goaltender, Patrick Waugh. And he also had the support of Brian Hayward, who had a spectacular year to back him up. And leading the charge, rookie head coach, the league's Jack Adams winner as the top coach, Pat Burns. This is going to be challenging for our hero and his brothers in arms. But here we go. Stanley Cup Final, Game 1, the Saddle Dome is beyond psyched, and why shouldn't they be? Game 1, the All-Star goalies Waugh and Vernon were outstanding. Our hero was being heavily contained, however, thanks to 2 Al MacInnis goals, the game was tied 2-2 after 2. Midway through the third, rookie Theo Fleury scores what would be proven to be the game winner, and the Flames take Game 1. And now Game 2, the excitement is electric, but it looks bad early in the second period. The Habs make it 2-0, and Waugh was giving fans a bad sense of deja vu. But our hero stepped it up, scoring his 10th goal these playoffs after a feed from McClellan and solved Waugh, and the Flames trailed by 1. Joel Otto would tie it 2-2 after 2, but the Habs were just too much to handle in the end, and the Flames would lose 4-2. This series is tied, heading to Montreal. Game 3, the Montreal form faithful is eager to see yet another banner, a 24th to be exact, hanging from the rafters. It went from 1-0 halves to 2-1 Flames and 2-2, then 3-2 Flames, and Calgary was about to take the game, but Mats Naslund tied the game with 41 seconds left. Our hero was having a rough night. He had a couple good chances, but it was on ice for a couple halves goals. We were off to OT, and the first overtime solved nothing as the second one was winding down. Joe tried to check Stefan Richer, but the star forward was getting away from him, allowing him to set up Ryan Walter for the double OT winner. The Flames now trailed these cup finals 2-1, and Nieuwendyk took a lot of flack for letting Richer get into position for the assist. He was also a -3 on the night. Things were looking bleak for our hero and the Calgary Flames. Game 4 in Montreal, the Habs took major control of things. The Flames need to hustle. After a scoreless first period, the Flames took a 2-0 lead, however, in the second period. They then led 3-1 with time winding down, but the Habs got one back with 27 seconds left to play and were trying for the equalizer once again, but Mullen shut them down with 11 seconds left with an empty netter. The series is tied. We're going back to Calgary. Nieuwendyk hasn't really been a factor yet in this series. Game 5 would be a good time to break out, and the Flames looked great and led 2-0 just 8 minutes in. The Habs played catch up the rest of the way, and the Flames won 3-2. Our hero just had one shot on goal, but it didn't matter. He was one win away from having his name etched on the Stanley Cup as the Flames took a 3-2 series lead as we head back to the Forum. Game 6. Our hero was about to be part of an infamous moment. The game was tied 1-1 early in the second period. The Flames were killing a penalty which their leader Lanny McDonald was serving. After Lanny hopped out of the box, Håkan Loob began a rush. Joe got the puck and was going on goal with his mentor coming in with him. Joe saw the wide open Lanny, fed in the puck, and McDonald scored his first goal of these playoffs, the last of his illustrious career, and it couldn't have come at a better time. His memorable celebration of said goal truly etched the memories of Flames fans forever. And 11 years after watching that same man score an infamous OT goal on his TV set, Nieuwendyk was now his teammate, helping him achieve his ultimate goal. The excitement was insane at the Forum as the Flames carried that 2-1 lead into the third period. A goal from Gilmore gave him a huge 3-1 advantage midway through the third. But the Habs struck 51 seconds later, keep their deficit at a goal. The time was ticking down. The Habs were pressing hard. Waugh had skated to the bench, and with 1:03 left, Gilmore notches an empty netter. The Flames lead 4-2. Our hero was just a minute away from achieving his dream. The clock counts down at the Forum. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. The Calgary Flames, Stanley Cup champions. Joe Nieuwendyk celebrates with Lanny and lifts that silver barrel over his head with pure joy and jubilation. At 22, he is a champion. He was indeed one of the final missing puzzle pieces en route to the Flames' goal of Cup success. While looking at this graphic, you can see it wasn't his best series, but again, who cares? He's a champion. You can't take that away from him. His name was forever on that cup, and he assisted on one of the most famous goals in Flames history, and maybe even a Stanley Cup history, giving Lanny the send-off he deserves and the turning point of the game that helped them win it all. So he still did something big in this series, and once again, his streak of performing well in series-clinching games stays intact. Overall, Joe had 10 goals and 4 assists for 14 points in these playoffs. His 10 goals was 7th best, but his 6 power play goals tied him for 3rd with teammate Joe Mullen, as well as Kings forward Chris Kontos. His impact on the extra man advantage was felt throughout this postseason, and again, his performance in series-clinching games didn't go unnoticed. So we go back to his regular season, which saw him score 51 goals and 31 assists for 82 points. And once again, it's line-mate Håkan Loob who is his number one guy. Loob assists on 18 of 51 of Joe's goals, and for the second straight year they collaborated on 8 assists together, and overall teamed up one way or another for 35 goals. Put on the line with them with Bullard gone was Joey's bestie, Gary Roberts, who added more grit to the line as just above a third of Joe's assists were to Gary, totaling 11, which was half of Roberts' 22 goals that year. Joe also once again had great chemistry with the defensemen, including McInnes, who he teamed up to create 23 goals with, and also showed chemistry here and there with Gilmore and Mullen. His 51 goals were tied for 5th with teammate Joe Mullen. Well, a sensational sophomore campaign for Joe Nieuwendyk as he got himself a Stanley Cup ring as a significant top-tier piece of this team. His efforts in the first round and the conference final above all stood out. He got himself another 50-goal season, tied for 5th in the league with goals, led the league in game-winning goals, tied for 7th power play goals, played in his second straight All-Star game, finished a plus 26, but oddly enough, got no votes for any awards. But hey, did it matter? Again, he won the biggest award you can win. Going into a new decade, Joe Nieuwendyk is ready to keep this train running. In 2 full seasons, Joe Nieuwendyk accomplished what some even wish to accomplish in their whole career. Again, with those 2 great seasons under his belt, he had a Stanley Cup, individual accolades, was great in the power play, the penalty kill, was a master in the clutch. But as the 1989-90 season approached, Calgary had some changes they had to deal with on top of Lanny McDonald's retirement. Hakan Lube, a man who was key in Joe's growth these early seasons, and the man he clicked with the most, took his Stanley Cup ring and went back to his native Sweden to finish his pro hockey career, which meant sophomore Theo Fleury would play a bigger role at right wing. Also, defenseman Rob Ramage left the club to take a captaincy role with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Also, the Flames had some good things come their way. In Lube's absence, a new right winger was making his NHL debut, as the fall of the Iron Curtain indeed happens, and saw many Soviet players defect, one of them being superstar Sergei Makarov, who would join the Flames this season. The Flames in the preseason were touted as the Stanley Cup favorites once again, many feeling the Flames were the NHL's new dynasty in waiting. The days of the Oilers were gone, it seemed, and their Alberta rivals were ready to dominate the NHL for years to come. Let's see how our hero would do amidst all this. He wasted no time getting going. Opening night, 2 goals against the Detroit Red Wings. The very next game, a huge 4-point night against the Islanders with a goal and 3 helpers. On October 21st, he had 3 assists in a win over Boston. And on October 27th, in a thrilling game against the Canucks, Joe had a monster night with 2 goals, 2 assists for 4 points. His second assist came with just 3 seconds remaining on a Theo Fleury goal to tie the game, and it would end in a 4-4 tie. On top of all that, he had 4 other games where he notched 2 points, and he started off as one of the hottest forwards in the league. 11 goals, 13 assists, 24 points in October, a huge plus 13 all in 11 games. It's one of the best single months of his entire career, and the Flames were off to a pretty good start. And November got off to a good start for Joe with 2 goals and assists for 3-point night against division rivals the Jets, but the rest of the month he only managed to score 7 points in 14 games, after averaging more than 2 points a game in October. He went into a slump. As with the Flames as a whole, they were only 11-9-8 at this point, and coach Terry Chris was back at it, calling out his players in the media, so that it didn't sit too well with GM Cliff Fletcher, as well as his public outbursts during games. It had become a punchline on sports news shows across Canada. Joe was not immune from these public knocks either, despite the Flames were still in the first in the Smythe division despite these issues. In December, however, he got back in the groove again. 2 goals against the Jets on the 6th, and then on the 14th against Stastny Sakic and a pathetic Nordiques team, he scored the 7th hat-trick of his career, a natural hat-trick at that, in an 8-2 win, and added an assist for a 4-point night. In the very next game, a win over the Mario Lemieux and the Penguins. Joe had 3 points, a goal and 2 assists. His goal was both a game winner and a power play marker. The Flames as a whole were showing a lot more life. He had 8 goals, 4 assists for 12 points in 12 games. The Flames went on an absolute tear in January and were looking more like the dominant force they were the year prior. Our hero played in some big games. For the 3rd straight year, he was selected to play the NHL All-Star Game in Pittsburgh on January 21st. And joining him was Joe Mullen for his 2nd, rising star Theo Fleury for his 1st, and Al McKinnis for his 3rd, and goalie Mike Vernon for his 3rd straight as well. The Campbells lost 12-7. Nieuwendyk did have an assist, and shortly after the All-Star break, he capped off the month with a 2-goal, 2-assist, 4-point night against Vancouver, and ended January with 16 points in 13 games. In February, the Flames stayed the course, and so did our hero, as he had 7 goals, 6 assists for 13 points in 11 games. And during a Northeast road trip, after a goal and an assist against the Rangers, he had 2 goals and a helper against the Islanders next game in a win. And the Oilers, who were showing life again this season, however, were first in the Smythe division at this point, 1 point ahead of the Flames. On February 25th, Joe and his teammates sent an emphatic message to their hated rivals, a 10-4 win, 2 goals for our hero. The Flames retook first place. Joe would then end the year like he started it, scorching hot, as the Flames blazed through March, just burning everyone in their path, and our hero was a huge help to say the least. 2 goals against Gretzky and a disappointing Kings squad in a shutout win, 4 assists on March 11th against Dale Howard, taking a highly improved Jets squad. On the 19th, 2 goals against former teammate Brett Hull and the Blues, and in his final game of the regular season, a goal and 2 assists for 3 points against Edmonton once again, showing their rivals this is their league now. 20 points in 15 games to end the season. Joe set out the last game of the season as the Flames had already clinched the playoffs and won the Smythe division for a 3rd straight season. They finished 42, 23, and 15 for 99 points. While not quite as dominant as the last season, it was still the 2nd best record in the NHL, only 2 points behind the Boston Bruins. Joe had another superb season, and now we'll see if the prospect and prediction of the Flames dynasty will come to fruition, because once again, it's playoff time. For the third straight season, the Flames will now face the Los Angeles Kings in the playoffs, this time in the Smythe Division semifinal after sweeping them in the Smythe final the year prior. Seems like every year there's always something different about this Kings squad. As this year, they were one of the NHL's most disappointing clubs. After a huge season last year with the arrival of Gretzky, and again despite Wayne winning his 9th scoring title, the Kings finished 34, 39, and 7 for just 75 points, 24 behind the Flames. They had the 4th best odds of winning the Stanley Cup in the preseason. While stars like Robitaille still produced as well, the Kings shockingly traded Bernie Nichols to the Rangers for Thomas Sandstrom, a trade that drew the ire of many Kings fans and hockey experts and analysts rolling their eyes. Kelly and Casper did their part, but injuries to Dave Taylor and Mike Krzyzewski didn't help. The team was rattled with injury issues, and defenseman Steve Duchesne, who did have a great year, and McSorley was kind of holding up his end, and Larry Robinson, who left Montreal after 17 seasons, there was a lack of depth, and of course to go with the injury issues, and goaltenders Kelly Rudy and Mario Gosselin both had bad seasons. Looked like it was going to be even easier for the Flames this year to take out the boys from La La Land. Game 1, and the Dome and the Flames are ready for back-to-back championships, and Wayne Gretzky is out of action with injuries. The Kings did strike first, but McInnes tied it on a penalty shot goal. Then less than 2 minutes later, Gary to Joe, who sets up, ow! The Flames lead 2-1 after 1, as well as after 2, and Vernon is playing great in net. The Flames took a 3-1 lead early in the third period, but completely fell apart. The Kings won 5-3 in a loss that had many scratching their heads. Anyway, Game 2, however, things went a lot better. Calgary led 2-1 after 1. Then it was the diverse and dimensional line striking Nieuwendyk to Makarov to Roberts, who may have the least coolest name in that pack, but either way, he scored the goal to make it 3-1. The Flames would take a 5-1 lead, but the Kings weren't giving up, getting 2 goals back, closing the gap to 5-3. But with time winding down in the second period, our hero makes magic happen, setting up Dougie Gilmore. 6-3 Flames after 2. It was 6-4 in the third, and it's Makarov to Nieuwendyk for a goal. 7-4 Flames en route to a huge 8-5 win. A goal, 2 assists, 3 points, perhaps his best single-game playoff performance in his career. Second star of the game despite Gilmore. The series is tied, but the Flames' defense and goaltending needs to get it together. Game 3, we ship to LA, and Wayne is back, and the Flames are on higher alert. The first period saw a goaltending clinic from Vernon and Rudy, as would this whole game. It was scoreless after 1. The Kings struck less than 30 seconds into the second period and led 1-0 after 2 and well into the third. The Flames were throwing everything at Rudy, as Nieuwendyk had 5 shots himself in this game but couldn't get one in the net. The Kings goaltender was looking like his old self in this game, but Mullen tied it with just under 6 minutes to play. But in overtime, Tony Granato's solo shorthander after Flames mishap ends the game. The Kings stun the world, taking a 2-1 series lead. Game 4, things were about to get a whole lot worse. Kings scored 3 goals in 11 minutes, and Mike Vernon was pulled from the game in a move that would likely haunt Terry Chris for quite some time. Rick Wamsley entered the game, but he was never exactly a playoff-savvy goaltender. He was quite the opposite, actually, being a seasoned vet of 9 seasons. 49 seconds into him taking over the net and goal, the Kings led 4-0 after 1. It was later 7-0, and the Flames were being humiliated, and they trailed 9-3. Near the end of the period, when our hero took a feed from his line of Makarov and Roberts and made it 9-4 and what would be a crushing 12-4 loss as Gretzky was back at full force to played the game of his life. The media tore the Flames to shreds. Gilmore and Mullen were taken to task for their awful performances in this game, and Terry Chris ripped his team a new one both publicly and privately. The Flames, the defending Cup champions, were on the verge of being eliminated. Game 5, our hero needs to do something and do something fast. It again is up to him to step up. The Flames fans almost seem lethargic at the Dome for this one. Vernon is back starting, and the defense is tightened up as of grinders as Joel Otto is on Gretzky more than the Great One's own shadow. The Flames are much more aggressive. Just about 4 minutes in to go in the first period, the little giant Theo Fleury is speeding along, and our hero takes control of the puck as he can. Nobody can take it from him. Dean Emerson completes the play with a goal. The Flames lead 1-0 after 1. Second period, hey, it's a power play. Gary's got it. Al keeps it. Joe shoots it. It's in the net. 2-0 Flames. Then later, Fleury and Joe set up Rick Natras. It's 3-0 Calgary after 2. This is more like it. The Kings did get one back in the third, but Natras had a second goal of the game, made it 4-1, but it's the two besties. Joe to Gary, 5-1 Flames. That's how it would end. Joe Nieuwendyk played his heart out. What a game. A goal, 3 assists, 4 points. Leave it to him to be the one to save this series for the Flames as they remain alive and look like the defending champions they are at last. He was named first star of the game and showed true leadership by example, but they still have a long way to go, as the King fans at the Forum are excited for the prospect of this upset in Game 6. Gretzky strikes just over a minute in, however, not long after. Gary to Joe Nieuwendyk. It's 1-1 and remains that way after 1. In the second period, Gilmore gives the Flames a 2-1 lead, and after the Kings tie at 4:12 left, Mullen gives the Flames a 3-2 lead, but time was winding down. The season looks to be seen, but Duchesne ties it with 1:43 left. We're off to overtime. The first overtime is intense with both teams playing with every fiber of their being, from the top to the fourth line, every defensive pairing, and both goalies doing their part. And with 2:23 remaining in overtime, Doug Gilmore gets the puck past the back of Kelly Rudy, and the Flames have forced a game sale. Wait a minute. Danny Morrell ruled the play was dead as he thought Rudy had the puck. But even the goal judge from behind the net turned on the red light, and ultimately the goal was disallowed. And Terry Crisp, of course, went berserk, which is nothing new, but this time you really can't blame him. So we're off to double OT. It's a frenzy for the puck-net Flames, and after Vernon has made a couple saves, Krushelnyski takes a wild stab at it. Vernon with all his might can't reach it. The Flames season is over, losing in 6 games to a team they were significantly better than all year. The dynasty was not to be. Joe Nieuwendyk, however, was the best Flames player in this series, bar none. 4 goals, 6 assists, 10 points, a huge +6. His amazing performance in Game 2, not to mention his series-saving epic performance in Game 5, were the only things to write home about for the Flames in this series. He led the entire series in scoring. As a matter of fact, he was tied for second in scoring in the playoffs when the series was over, along with Cam Neely of the Bruins and Jari Kurri of the Oilers, and just 1 point behind leader Dino Ciccarelli of the Capitals. But the difference was they were all moving on to the next round. And speaking of the next round, the Kings were promptly swept by the Oilers. And to add insult to injury to the Flames and their fans, the Oilers win their 5th cup in 7 seasons. Now that the season was over, however, Joe Nieuwendyk joined Team Canada at the 1990 World Hockey Championships in Switzerland, his first professional international competition, and joining him were Fleury, Gilmore, McInnes, and McCowan for Team Canada. However, Joe only played 1 game in the tournament. While Fleury played very well, Canada choked in the medal round and came in 4th. All the while, 4 other Flames played as well, totaling 9 overall. They were at the World Championships as Joe Otto and Paul Ranheim represented Team USA, while Suter and Mullen actually declined to play. And Sergei Makarov won his 8th World Championship gold medal for the Russians, while Yuri Herdina scored a bronze for the Czechs, and former Flame Håkan Loob won a silver for Sweden. It was another banner season for our hero, 45 goals, 50 assists, and a career-high 95 points. The absence of Loob didn't hurt Joe whatsoever, as Sergei Makarov filled the void just fine, assisting on 17 of Joe's goals. The two worked together to assist on 17 goals with one another. Makarov has 62 assists, meaning more than half somehow involved Joe Nieuwendyk. And the left winger on the line was Gary Roberts, who kept getting better and better and had a career year himself. And Nieuwendyk assisted on 18 of 39 Gary goals, as this top line was dangerous. Also, Joe once again was firing on all cylinders with Al MacInnis and Gary Suter. As a matter of fact, before Bowen implemented the Russian 5 system, or implemented the defensive system that created opposing zone presence and goals known as the Russian 5, Suter and MacInnis were out there with Nieuwendyk, Roberts, and Makarov. It created a major onslaught against the opposition and worked very successfully. And Terry Crisp, say what you want about him, deserves a lot of credit for that. It wasn't quite as defensive-minded as the Russian 5, but the Flames in this system here was somewhat of a precursor to it. Had they won the Stanley Cup in 1990, we'd be talking about this group just as much. Also, let's not forget Makarov was very familiar with that future Detroit core. Joe also clicked when shifted with rising star Theo Fleury on top of all this. But in a new one, he actually finished in the top 10 in plus-minus 6 with a +32, showing his improvements defensively and his passing game also improving dramatically. He was only slightly behind teammates Jamie McCowan and Sergei Makarov in this category, and Gary Roberts was close behind him, and Paul Ranheim completes a core of 5 Flames players in the top 10. Joe got some votes for the Lady Byng Trophy, coming in 10th, with 7 votes, as the trophy went to former teammate, now one of the biggest superstars in the league, Brett Hull. Yeah, I don't know why either. Joe's growth as a player really showed the 1989-90 season. He wasn't content to cruise on the immense success of his first 2 seasons, notching a career high in both assists and points. He was also showing his growth as a true leader. His performance during the Flames' playoff woes showed how bad he wanted to win when they end up on the losing side. He showed a lot in that regard. He was once again in the top 10 for power play goals. For the first time ever, the top 10 in plus-minus, finishing 6th. He played in the NHL All-Star Game for the 3rd straight time, and got some votes for the Lady Byng Trophy, and on top of that, he was the Calgary Flames recipient of the Molson Cup with most 3-star selection points. On top of all this, he's become one of the most popular players in the team's history after just 3 seasons. And with that, it ends part 1 of our look at the great Joe Nieuwendyk. We delve further into the 1990s in part 2 as we complete the look at his tenure with the Calgary Flames. Going into the new decade, Joe takes on a whole new big leadership role with the team, and the team undergoes several different changes. At this point, the Flames dynasty, at least prospectful dynasty, has taken a huge back seat. What can our hero do to try and reinvigorate things once again for championship hopes in Calgary? Find out in part 2 coming up very soon. Are there any other players you'd like to see us cover extensively for their careers? Leave a suggestion in the comments, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and of course share the video on many social media outlets. And until next time, I'll see ya!